How's it going, everybody? And welcome back for another installment of Tech Support Thursday. I'm actually really excited about this one because, well, it's the second week in a row from after my trip. This is going to be a kind of a short one because of the fact that we don't have a ton of questions that came in over the last week, which is completely fine. Sometimes they're longer because I have more questions to answer. This not so much. So I'm going to go back just a touch over a week. And to give you guys some details about the servers that I've got and stuff like that, because that's one of the first questions that's there. Um, so, the first comment from a week ago was on how a $1,000 investment can help you earn $100,000 or more a year. Yes, it is a little clickbaity. I understand that, but it gets the point across. People click on it and watch, so it's effective. That was where I was going with that. Rob, can you please provide the info and description to buy the Cisco UCS? So, as I've stated multiple times in the past, Cisco UCS C220 M3s. You need to go figure out which one's going to work for you. And most of them have two CPUs, each CPU having typically 8 cores or more, will give you the most bang for your buck. Now, one thing that I've learned over time is that the speed that the CPUs run at, whether it's 2 gigahertz, 2.2, 2.4, 2.5, that will generally give you a little bit more stretch on the back end. So if you buy 8-core CPUs and you've got 2 of them and you have hyperthreading enabled, and you've got 2.5 gigahertz a pop, you're going to be pushing almost 40 gigahertz by the time you're all said and done. So that's basically what I would recommend you go do, is buy servers that are going to meet your needs. How do you know that? You're going to have to look at the workloads you're going to run. So are you looking at running CPU intensive workloads? Are you looking at running a lot of, right now I'm running a lot of VMware, so a lot of CPU intensive workloads. If you're not going to be running VMware, you're going to be running a lot of, say, Cisco routers and switches. CPU really isn't going to be your big detriment. You can probably run a pretty big topology on 30 or 40 gigahertz of CPU. So you're not really looking for vCPUs because you're not running, that will come into play, but that's not really the main thing you're looking for. So that's that. I don't like to give out specific links because the link might die in the future because that particular item is no longer available for sale. And so then it goes and people are like, hey, your link died. They're bound to. So that's that. So let's see here. How does install a CSR 1000V in Eve NG? Hi there, Rob. Great channel. I was going through the installation, but I had this problem. And of course, I love it when, sarcastically love it, when people post the errors that they've got and they don't take it far enough. They don't go look it up and try to figure it out on their own. Am I missing something? I honestly have no idea. If you follow the video that I put together and you follow the steps that I went through and you have the EVNG documentation up, I literally followed it line by line until it worked. Now, you don't have to do that. If you don't want to install the CSR 1000V the way that I've done it, you don't have to. You can go to CML. You can pay the $200 if you already have. Great. Download the QCOW2 image with serial connectivity, which is automatically defaulted to run in serial interface, not the VGA, the virtual VGA, which is the inside of the VMware console. I'd recommend you guys do that. I'd recommend you go through, get the QCOW2 image that has the serial interface already tied to it so that you don't have to worry about playing around with it. Now, mind you, once I was able to get that working, it worked great, and I just downloaded the image from Eve and got it working, and it was awesome. So that's what I think you should do. Next question, next question. I passed the VMware vSphere 6.7 exam today. That was me posting that I passed. I'm in IT and Network Plus certified. VMware certs caught my attention and their sites are confusing. I have a 6.7 ESXi running and learning these systems with labs, but see that 7.0 is out, but wondering if it's worth to test for 6.7 or 7. I did see the subscription and thinking of doing the same, studying for the CCNA, but want to take a break and do virtualization. Thanks for the video. So, for those of you that are on the fence, 6.7 or 7.0, my honest opinion, if you're going to study anything, I would study 6.7 because you're probably going to, unless you have a newer server, you might run into CPU issues. So 7.0 won't work on some of the older CPU platforms that are out there. So you might try to install it on the server that you bought and you realize, oh crap, it won't run. So that's one thing that I would recommend you do. So in following on with that comment, when you are looking at doing your labs, make sure that you're doing a little bit of research to figure out what specific versions will run on what specific CPUs. So it's not hard to figure that out. There's a matrix online that you can use that'll help you get that dialed in. But as long as you buy pretty much anything E5, 2660, 2650, stuff like that, if you buy a decent CPU, and when you're looking on eBay, that's where I buy all my servers is from eBay. Whenever you see a CPU model listed, grab that specifically Intel. I don't run any AMD. Grab that specific model of CPU, open up Google, and paste it into the search URL. When you do that, you'll be presented with a website response called ark.intel.com, which will be specific to, which is an archive. I recommend you go to there, and it'll give you the technical specs of that CPU. It'll tell you when it was released. We don't care that it's probably been discontinued. You don't care. Discontinued doesn't mean there won't be any support for it, and honestly, it's a lab. You don't care. You're going to want to see how many CPUs or how many cores is hyperthreading supported, that type of stuff. If hyperthreading is supported, that is the direction you want to go, because that means you're going to be able to take the logical processors. So you've got two cores, and you've got, two CPUs, and each CPU has 8 cores. That's going to give you a total of 16 CPUs, 16 logical processors, or 16 physical processors. Then with hyperthreading, you're actually going to have a total of 32. Hyperthreading allows you to double that number. So that's where you want to look at it. That's basically how that process works. And I've explained this in the past, and it seems like a lot of folks don't understand how CPUs work. But that's the key thing you want to remember. Once you have that process enabled, you can then, which hyperthreading is enabled in most cases by default, but when you buy your server, the other thing that you want to pay attention to when you're buying your server is buying enough RAM with the server. Don't go cheap and get 32 gigs. You're going to find out very quickly that you can't run certain workloads. You won't be able to do, for those of you that want to use your server to do multiple things like do VMware, do Microsoft, do Linux, do coding, do stuff like that. So these are some things that I would highly recommend you spend some time looking into. But those are the main specific ones, is CPU and RAM. Get a decent SSD software. What does SSD stand for? I forgot. Solid state drive. Get yourself a solid state drive. You can go hard drive too. It's, unless you're trying to run these workloads in production, an SSD isn't really going to make that much of a difference. So a SAS 15,000 RPM hard drive will work just as well. So I would, when you're studying for it, I would start at 6.7, and you might, and if you have the VMware Advantage membership, then you get all those versions for free, right? So you're purchasing access to it, right? You get then you can download pretty much anything that VMUG allows you to download through the evaluation experience. That's what I pay for, and it works out great. Then download your ESXi, download vCenter server, get them deployed in your server. You can 100% run an entire data center and virtualization environment, NSX and desktop mobility using Horizon in a nested environment. So it's possible to be done. Just do some research as you're going along with it. Okay, so the next question is Tech Support Thursday, Ticket 14. Hi, Rob. You mentioned about pre-sale activity. That's interesting. May you tell more about it? Maybe some tips and tricks. What should be the strong side of pre-sales engineer? So there's really not that much of a tip or a trick. Pre-sales is you are the person talking to the customer to try to get them to buy, trying to get them to, you're trying to sell them on a solution. Sometimes there will be an engineer working with you that'll have the more of the technical chops, but you're the sales side of the partner. So you're the one talking to the customer. You're not the account executive or the account manager where you're quote unquote whining them and dining them to, buy, take them out to lunch, take them out to dinner, that type of stuff. Although that might be included in some of your meetings, but a lot of times you're there and you are you're the person that's talking to the customer, trying to figure out what the business issues are, identifying the business drivers, what they're trying to do, and then your job is to try to come up with solutions that are going to make that happen. A lot of what you're going to do is high level. So, for example, maybe they want to take a data center that they've got on-prem and move it to the cloud. Well, your job would then be to work, figure out, okay, how do I move that? What are the different options to move that? Can I do a vMotion from my on-site data center to the cloud? What are my options for that? So whether it's a lift and shift, it's a rebuild and you just migrate, there's a bunch of different opportunities out there available for that. Or maybe they want to rebuild their WAN. Maybe they're on some legacy frame relay or old, some very, very slow MPLS circuits, and they're like, we don't want MPLS anymore, and we want to go just commodity internet and just run SD-WAN over the top. It's regardless of where I stand on certain technologies, my job at the end of the day is to get the customer to be comfortable on the direction that they want to go and to help them get there. A lot of times we're integrators. We're trying to integrate new solutions into existing environments. So I work a lot in brownfield. So you have to take into consideration a lot of different variables. So you definitely, a lot of times you're not going to work alone. You're going to work with other folks and you're going to bounce ideas off of other people. You're not, depending on the size of the environment or the organization you work in, you might be the only pre-sales person. You're going to be pulling in engineering a lot if you're going to do that. The organization I work with now, when we talk to customers about what they're trying to do, I'm involved in a lot of pre-sales. And a lot of times we're just there to help educate the customer. That's our main job as a pre-sales engineer, is to help educate them on what the options are that are out there, and some ideas as to how we can go about moving forward. Some what we oftentimes call action items. Okay, what information do I need to go? If I don't have the answer to something, what do I need to go find answers for? And I write those down, or stuff like that. Those are the main things that we end up having to deal with. Because then when you're talking to a customer, and they, for example, I work a lot with VMware NSX. Currently studying pretty hardcore for a couple of different NSX exams. So when I'm talking to a customer and the customer says, we want to be able to go and we have NSX-V deployed right now, or NSX for vSphere. We have that deployed right now, and we want to get off of it and go to NSX-T because NSX-V, if there's no other good reason other than the fact that NSX-V is going to be no longer supported in early 2022. So basically they're deprecating the capability. I know I'm putting out content for it, but it is what it is. But I use that to prepare for one of the exams that I'm working on, and I still work with customers that still have it deployed. So it's still a necessary thing that I need to be familiar with. So they want to get off of V and move to T. Okay, fine. Well, our job as pre-sales engineers would
we're gonna talk to the customer and figure out, what their time frames look like. How complicated is the solution that they're looking to do? Is it, do they have, are they using every bell and whistle possible in underneath the vSphere umbrella, or are they just doing distributed firewall, maybe a little bit of VPN, maybe some load balancing? Well, we'll figure that out. And then once we figure it out, then we'll go through and work with the customer on how to migrate their existing environment into the new environment. Maybe we have to rebuild their environment in T and then just move stuff over one at a time. There's different options that are out there for us to figure out, but it's our job as pre-sales folks to be like, okay, here are some of the different options that you have available to you, and these are the different ways that we can get you from A to B. Maybe, some are more expensive than others, so on and so forth. So, what should be the strong side of pre-sale engineer? I wouldn't say there is a strong side other than the fact that, hey, you need to know when to say I don't know. You don't have to know all the answers. You don't. A lot of pre-sales people that I've worked with, specifically account managers, a lot of the account managers that I've worked with, they're not super technical. They know how something works at a high level. They can say, hey, it's this or that, or yeah, we can help you get there. But most of them aren't going to oversell and underdeliver. Most of them are going to be like, you know what, I don't have the answer to that, but I can get an engineer on the call and we can figure out what's going on. And sometimes I'm pulled into calls and, I've been pulled into calls where it's like, hey, customer's asking for this, or sometime more often than not, you're not going to get pulled into a call. You're going to be like, maybe that call gets cut short, or the person running the call is going to take that down as an action item, reach out to an engineer that knows what's going on, get some feedback, and then follow up in an email. There's a number of different ways of getting the job done. I'm just trying to give you some examples of how that would work. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is, as a pre-sales engineer, your job is to identify the problems and attempt to come up with technical solutions for those business problems. You're probably not going to have all the answers out of the gate, and that's okay. You should be able to pull in resources that may have the answer, or depending on the complexity of the task at hand, you might have to take a very complicated business issue and break it down into multiple individual projects. It could be a massive rebuild. They might be on some really old gear, and you end up having to do a bunch of rebuilds and upgrades and stuff like that before you can even come close to doing a migration. I've seen that happen too. So, and then it might take another twist. One that I just ran into the other day was not only an NSXV to T migration, but they also wanted to look at doing WAN upgrades, and they're looking at doing replication and a lot of data center specific stuff. But those are all things that fall inside of my wheelhouse, all things that I know how to do. So I was, working with another engineer. So a lot of times, if there's a lot of work, you're not going to have one engineer on the call. You're going to have a couple of them. They're going to tag team a lot of the work. So you're not one. It's not one pre-sales engineer and one technical engineer. It's going to be a couple technical engineers handling the heavy lifting, and they're the ones doing a lot of the work. I do a bit of both. It's pre-sales and integration or implementation. So I do both. But the key thing about pre-sales is education. Bottom line, it's education. Let's talk about Palo Alto, virtual wire or vWire and tap interface. Thank you. You are welcome. Tech support Thursday. Ticket 14. Would be great if you could put timestamps as to what was discussed. I'll see what I can do. Another comment on I passed the vSphere 6.7 exam. Congrats, Rob. Is it necessary to attend VMware training in order to take this exam? Thanks in advance. If you've never taken a VMware certification before, yes. You'll have to take there's a 1-week course that you have to take, and it varies in price. I was very fortunate early on in my career where the company that I was working for paid for me to go to the training. and I was just able to go. It was 1 week long. It's a required course. Do I think it back then? Do I think it made a difference? Not really. I was already doing a lot of labbing. I was already doing a ton of reading and watching videos. So for me, it was something. It was I went through the motions. I showed up for class. I did what I had to do in order to get through it. And by the time I was done, I don't really feel like it really benefited me. But then again, I already had I won't say a strong VMware background, but I was comfortable working with a lot of different solutions. And it was a matter of just reading through the documentation, reading the book, and well, that's basically it. Just taking your time with the technology, make sure you understand it. Read, watch, lab, read, watch, lab, read, watch, lab. But in order for you to get credit for the certification exam that you're taking, you have to take and pass that. I'm sorry, not take and pass. You have to sit for the and get credit for that course. So they refer to it as the ICM course. It's the Install, Configure, Manage course. That's the required course that he's referencing, and you do have to take that. So, in order for that to work, yeah. Now you could take the exam and not take the ICM course. VMware will gladly take your money, and you just blew $250 on an exam you can't get credit for. So be careful what you ask for. Let's see. Another question on how $1,000 investment can help you earn $100,000 or more a year. Thank you for your video, Rob. Greetings from Russia. I don't have any experience with servers. Should I install ESXi on bare metal and then install Linux on ESXi virtual machine and then use EVE-NG? Can I connect to the server with SSH from my PC? Sorry for stupid questions. So the answer to your question is I would recommend installing ESXi on bare metal because then you're not limited to just EVE. You can install other virtual machines as well. You can run EVE alongside of many other things. You don't have to install Linux and then install EVE. There is a way of doing that. Typically, that's the bare metal install where you would install Linux on the server, and then you would go via Linux, and then you would install and run EVE from there. You would go and do the there's a bunch of command line install lines that you would go use, but that's what I would do. So I'm sorry, I wouldn't do it the way you're describing in the question. Download the EVE-NG community version, unless you're willing to pay, and you get download the Pro, get the license for it, and then you can go through and you can just install the EVE-NG virtual machine directly inside of ESXi and run it that way. You don't have to deploy a Linux box and then I've never done it that way. I mean, you can try. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Can I connect to the server with SSH from my PC? That's how you have to connect to it. So you'll SSH to the server to do things like upload images and do different things with the server. For example, if you want to upload your images to the EVE server so that you can see images show up in your workspace, that's how you do that. The other thing is you'll have to go through and do, if you want to run, what's the other thing you have to do? Just cross, like Windows PCs, Windows servers, they take a little bit of additional workload. You can do a lot from, if you take FileZilla, you can SFTP to the server, and then you can just drag and drop your images in there and use the FileZilla GUI to create your directories. But if you want to upload Windows or Linux images and have actual servers inside of your EVE-NG deployment, then that takes a little bit more legwork in order to make things work. But yeah, you can SSH into the PC. You won't use SSH to interact with it from the front end. You're going to use a web browser, but you'll use SSH to connect to it and do management of it. I passed the VMware vSphere 6.7 exam today. I got very lucky and landed a VMware admin spot with little experience. Not sure what I need to be studying other than glare at IT Pro TV. I I never use IT Pro TV. I have no idea how good their content is, what they cover. I do know a couple of instructors over there from seeing them on social media. But beyond that, my recommendation would be I had good luck using CBT Nuggets. They have a couple of really good VMware data center virtualization courses. I would watch 6.5. 6.5 was good, and then I would also watch 6.7 for any updates. 7.0 came out, but not a lot of people are on 7 yet. People are migrating towards it, but not a ton from what I've seen. A lot of people are still on 6.x. You're going to find a lot of customers, unless they are doing a greenfield deployment and doing a complete migration from 6.x to 7.x. A lot of customers are going to be they're going to be staying at 6.5, 6.7, so on and so forth until they're forced to do an upgrade. I'd also recommend, if you're doing a VMware work and you're playing with it, build your own lab. So go buy a server off of eBay, and then go and do get the VMware Advantage membership. Pay the $200, download the images that you get from the eval experience, and then go from there and build your own lab. The thing you're going to find out about VMware is if you're not doing the clickety-click stuff on a regular basis in a lab, and where you're not afraid to break stuff and stuff like that, you're going to want to spend a lot of time doing that, because that's the only way you're going to get a anything, really. Whether it's VMware or Cisco, spend a little bit of money up front. It's going to be wholly beneficial for you as someone that wants to be in this industry. You're going to have to lab. I don't know anybody that works in the IT industry, especially on the infrastructure side of the house, VMware, Microsoft, Cisco, Juniper, pick your Palo Alto, that is successful in their job, that doesn't have some semblance or some kind of home lab, or they're renting rack rentals. In my opinion, rack rentals, there's going to always be something missing, or you're going to be paying money for something. The small monthly fee that I have to pay to run my servers, I gain a ton more experience by buying a server and figuring out how to get it online by doing some Google searches and spending a little bit of time messing around with it. I'm that much further along than I would be if I just went out and did rack rentals and let somebody else worry about the nuances. If you're not putting the time in the right areas, you're wasting your time. Take the effort, or take the initial effort, and do what you got to do. And that last question is on MPLS Layer 3 VPN 1. Sir, may I know what different between if we join member or not? If you are not a member, you don't get to download any of the topology files or initial configs that I provided for some of the content that I put on the channel. If you do become a member, and it's not available in all countries, I've come to learn, if you do become a member, you get access to the topology files and the initial configs for a lot of the stuff that I put on online. It's not everything, obviously. It's just a few. It's SD-WAN, the CCNA bootcamp that I did, and what else was out there? Oh, CCNP Enterprise. So some of the newer stuff that I've put out. So if you're interested in diving into that, that's where the membership comes into play. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up this installment of Tech Support Thursday. I want to thank everybody for coming out and watching and hanging out with me. If you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll catch all of you next Thursday. Take it easy, guys.